Are you an adventurer looking to take your hunt to the next level? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to East Meets West Hunt with your host, Bo Martonic.
All right, we are live. Brian Hale from Elk County Outfitters. How you doing?
Good, Bo. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to get to talk to you here. You had reached out to me, I guess it was probably only a week ago here, but and wanted to talk about some of the elk application processes and everything. And I was like, this is perfect because I'd written an article on this on my website a few years ago, and it's one of the, as I was telling you before we were recording, it's one of the most popular articles that I had written, and I get a ton of questions about applying in Pennsylvania, and I've been doing it since the beginning, and trying to get one of those coveted elk tags, but I feel like no one knows it better than you guys that are the well-known outfitter in the area for these elk hunts.
Yep, we deal with it. We deal with it all the time. My name is Brian Hale with Elk County Outfitters. I own and operate Elk County Outfitters now. I'm about 3 years. This will be the third season at the helm, essentially, of Elk County Outfitters. Back in 2002, ECO was actually started by my good buddy Jack Manick Jr. He unfortunately passed away unexpectedly in 2021 in the summer, and after his passing, his widow and his mother and father reached out to me and asked me if I would want to kind of step up and take over Elk County Outfitters. I was kind of Jack's, I guess, for lack of a better term, we call right-hand man or number one guy, however you want to say it. And I was pretty well involved with him through the process of everything, from booking to actual hunts and follow-ups and everything, for many years prior to his passing. So it kind of made sense. I jumped in there under unfortunate circumstances, it was, but it is what it is. He had built quite an operation up. He had built quite a legacy, and I really didn't want to see it just kind of go by the wayside once he went to the happy hunting grounds in the sky. So I stepped up. It was quite a feat at first getting permitting and everything switched over. There's a lot of red tape in the background that most folks don't realize. Permitting through various state agencies, DCNR, Game Commission, state parks, local township permits. There's quite a bit of red tape there and a lot of hoops to jump through. So I had to get stuff switched up to my name after Jack's passing, and kind of jumped in from there. And this will be the third year now that I've been spearheading, I guess you would call, running Elk County Outfitters, and things have been really well. I mean, Jack was a huge integral part of the operation. I mean, he was the center, he was the hub. But he would tell you just the same as I would, Elk County Outfitters was never just one person or two, three or four, or even half a dozen guys. It was 10, 12, 24 guys strong. I mean, it's just a big family, and everybody pitches in and everybody steps up to the plate when the time is needed. And I'm fortunate to have a great group of guides behind us. Jack had assembled a great group of guys. And over the years, we've become much more than just guides and friends. We've become family. I mean, some of us take vacations together. We do a lot of stuff outside of elk season together. It's really become a family, and there's so much camaraderie and everything that comes from the elk hunt. So much more is born out of it than just going elk hunting in Pennsylvania, which is a treat in itself.
Yeah, that's a treat in itself. I feel like that's everybody's dream. As many people as I've talked to over the last 300 some episodes of doing this podcast from out west and everything, that afterwards I'm talking to these proficient elk hunters, and they're like, how do I get a tag in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, most people have Pennsylvania, you have elk. I mean, there's just there isn't any awareness out there for most of the Western folks that we even have this out here, let alone the quality, let alone the size of the animals that are here.
Yeah.
But yeah, getting that tag can be the tough part. Well, that is the tough part, essentially. I mean, that is the biggest hurdle to overcome, when trying to hunt Pennsylvania elk. So that kind of rolls us all into our application process. So things have changed a little bit here in Pennsylvania for the application process this year. Generally, in the for the past history, elk applications elk application window, I should say, did not open or did not start until the general hunting licenses would go on sale each year, which would have been usually around the middle of June. So in Pennsylvania, our license years go July 1 to June 30, as opposed to a calendar January 1 date, December 31 date. So when our general hunting licenses, which would cover deer and turkey and small game and everything else and bears, they would go on sale in mid-June with an active date of July 1. That was when the elk application window would also open. And then there'd be a mad rush, right at that time. Everybody's in the stores buying their hunt licenses, online buying their hunt licenses. Well, they're going to do their elk applications while they're there. And elk seasons had always been traditionally, the original elk season structure was just one single season in November, generally right around the very first week of November. Here 4 years ago, this is the fourth season now, that the Game Commission instituted or implemented a archery season, which occurs in September during the rut, and then a late season, which is later in the winter, generally right around the whole first week of January. And that's an any weapon season also. So archery, the early archery season during the rut is the only season that's weapon specific. The other two, the general season November and the late in January, are any weapon. So when they instituted this new archery season going on 4 years ago now, and that's starting around September, there was a very narrow window from when tags were allocated, which generally the Game Commission would have the elk drawing held. It was usually around August 20s. However, it would fall on a weekend there, usually early August 20s, mid-August 20s. That's when the Game Commission would perform their elk drawing lottery at the Elk Expo held at the Visitor Center grounds in Benezet. So what they were finding was they were drawing folks for archery season, for archery tags in middle of August, and their season to archery hunt was 3 weeks out. They were starting to hunt the middle of September. So guys were really, really jammed up with time frames. So the way our structure of drawing tags here is, there's no way, it's a bonus point system, so there is no preference points. There's no guarantee to ever draw a tag in Pennsylvania. Whereas opposed to, some of the places out west, when you hit a certain threshold of preference points, you are in a guaranteed pool of tag winners. We just don't have enough tags allocated in Pennsylvania to be able to do that. So we have a bonus point system. That bonus point system just simply means they put your name in the drawing again for every unsuccessful previous application. So if I have been applying for 5 years, the past 5 years, and I haven't been drawn, when I apply again this year, I'm going to have my 5 previous unsuccessful applications, plus this year. So my name's going to be in the hat 6 times. But there's going to be a whole bunch of people that are going to be in there for the very first time. And there's going to be a whole bunch of people that are probably have more points than me that are in there. And then it's just a matter of luck of the draw, getting that tag. So with the bonus point system, like I said, there's no way to ever plan a hunt in Pennsylvania. There's no way to schedule vacation. There's no way to save and pinch your pennies, if you would be looking to go guided. So it almost became a hardship for some folks. Drawing a tag in middle of August and hunting it middle of September, they were having 3-4 weeks tops, to try to plan a hunt. Scheduling the work leave was the biggest thing. So several years ago, the Game Commission elkologist Jeremy Banfield, he instituted a post-hunt survey where everybody that got an elk tag would get a survey at the end of the season. And that survey had a whole bunch of questions related to, your overall experience. Did you hunt private land? How many elk did you see? Then there was always a blank section for comments. And he said overwhelmingly one of the biggest complaints, and I use air quotes there, because they're hunting elk in Pennsylvania, but was the time crunch. Guys just felt like they didn't have time to prepare. So this past season, he saw a whole bunch more of those complaints again. And he lobbied the Board of Commissioners to actually change the elk lottery drawing and also season dates he changed a little bit. So on behalf and in benefit to the archery hunter specifically, Jeremy was able to get the elk lottery drawing moved up into July. It's actually July 28th this year, so it's about 3 weeks earlier than it was previously. And he also bumped the start of elk archery season to the right one whole week in September. So whereas last year I think we hunted September 10 was the first day of elk archery season last year, it's September 16th this year, which that bump to the right really actually falls better in line with the rut, as far, as in my opinion. So archery hunters didn't lose anything by the archery season moving to the right, and they were better off there, and they definitely were better off by moving the drawing to the left on the calendar. So it gives everybody more time to prepare. So essentially, they've more than doubled the amount of time now that folks have when they draw archery tags. So that's a huge win, for anybody that's looking to draw an elk archery tag in Pennsylvania, and even the November tags. It still just gives you more time. So what he did in turn, when they moved that elk drawing and the expo date back into July, they then had to adjust their application window. So now with the use of the PAL system over the last, I don't know, it's been a long time now, but with all the digital, license sales and ways to apply and everything now, the Game Commission actually stepped it way back to the left and opened up the elk application process at the beginning of February this year. So you could apply for an elk tag in Pennsylvania starting back, I believe it was February 1 or something. I mean, I have to look, see how the actual calendar date
that's what it's showing here, February 1st through July 16th.
Yep. So now really a lot of that time constraint and the problems associated with that stuff has been relieved or alleviated, I should say. So now you could go, right, even though our general licenses aren't on sale yet here in Pennsylvania for the 23-24 season, you could still go online, you could still go to any point of sale and do your elk applications. So that really is a big win. It's a big thing for Pennsylvania sportsmen and non-residents, who are all trying to apply, because once you draw that tag, you're all in that same crunch. You're all trying to plan something that you never planned for. Most folks don't keep a sock full of money rolled up in their sock drawer just for when I draw my Pennsylvania elk tag, or they don't have a lot of leeway at work for vacation times. So this really helps this new product. It doesn't totally alleviate it, because I'd rather see them draw 1 year ahead. I'd rather see a double draw 1 year and then always go, always be able to be looking out a year ahead. But I don't think we'll ever see that. I think this is probably about as best as we're going to get when it comes to when it comes to the bones of the system. Yeah,
I guess that makes it difficult with the hunting with our Pennsylvania season starting July 1, as far as like the calendar, or the calendar year per the hunting licenses, to be able to do it any earlier. But most of the western states, the way they do it is you draw anywhere from December the previous year, like Idaho, all the way and through I think June might be the latest that I know of, to be able to, and that gives you time to be able to plan that.
Yeah. Yep. Even I know a lot of right there, late May, early June. That's a huge cluster of western states that are drawing their tags for the fall, for that are into the fall, and it gives guys time to figure out and plan.
Yeah, and
well, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say I didn't realize that change happened from for the February 1st opening until really last weekend, when I was at the Total Archery Challenge in Seven Springs. The Pennsylvania Game Commission had a booth there, and they were selling the applications for elk tags. I was like, wait, that's a little early. Like I normally, I just always bought it with my license, and that's really good to know, as far as that this only goes until July 16th now, versus when you could at the end of July. That's a big change.
Well, yeah. So if guys are used to, I think it used to always be like July 31. The end of July was the historic last day to apply for Pennsylvania elk tags. But now that's bumped up. We just cut, 2 weeks off of that. So hopefully some guys don't get, or gals, hopefully they don't get pinched and thought, oh, well, I have until the 31st, and then realize it's too late. But there'll be a lot. So this year, this coming, when we buy our general tags here in a couple weeks in June, I imagine we're going to see that in print in the Hunter's Digest. So when they had this rollout for the February 1 bump up, their only method of dissemination was like social media and their own website and like press releases. And so if folks didn't catch, those announcements on the Game Commission website or their Facebook page or Instagram or whatever, what have you, a lot of folks didn't know. And really, there's a lot of folks that just don't follow it all that closely. So it easily gets missed. So that's why we always try to do what we can do to make sure we talk and tell people and explain, specifically, hey, look, there's a little bit shorter of a time this year, or the deadline's moved up, I should say, this year. So please, if you're planning on applying, don't miss out. Don't miss that date.
Yeah. And the one thing I wanted to mention here and talk to you about is, now with the different season dates, with having, I think it's awesome being able to have the archery season now and the late season. But the one thing that's different than all the other Western states is that your points that you get aren't just, you don't just get, say in Colorado, I have 6 elk points right now. I can use that for archery, rifle, or muzzleloader, where in Pennsylvania, there's separate point systems for each season.
Correct. Yeah. So think of it like a pool or a bucket. So we have 3 we have 3 elk seasons. There is a bonus point pool for each season. So if you've been applying for elk archery since the beginning, you would have your 3 previous unsuccessful plus this year going into it. So you have 3 rollover bonus points from previous unsuccessful apps. You have a whole nother bucket, a whole nother separate pool of your general season apps. And conversely, you have a whole nother pool of your late season apps, your unsuccessful late season apps. And they operate 100% independently of each other. And if you would draw any tag in one of the 3 seasons, you're only exhausting the points related to that tag that you draw. So you draw a general season this year, you're still going to maintain your archery points and your late points. So the way that's another anomaly almost, I guess, like you said, compared to a lot of Western stuff where you just have an elk point and you can apply that to any season or apply those to any season you want to try for. Whereas here, they're all individually kept and stored and maintained. And then those points are only active on years that you apply for those licenses. So that meaning, like, if you would 1 year forget to apply or 2 years would forget to apply, you don't zero out or you don't lose those points. Pennsylvania system's not set up like that. I know there are some Western states, I'm pretty sure Wyoming's like that. If you don't apply for 2 years, you will lose anything that you've accumulated. So that's the nice thing about Pennsylvania. Here's that. And then also we have, and a lot of Western states have this also too, is we have a bonus point only option. So let's just say Bo already knows he's going to have an elk archery tag out west somewhere this year. So he certainly doesn't want to, that has conflicting dates with the Pennsylvania elk archery hunt. He certainly doesn't want to draw a Pennsylvania tag at the same year he already has a trip planned somewhere else. So at the time of application, you have an option then to purchase bonus point only. So you're still getting the benefit of having a point, it's available for the year, but you're not actively in the drawing. So a lot of times we tell folks, a lot of folks don't realize that either, that, they think, oh, well, I have to apply them in the drawing, but maybe I know I'm having knee surgery and I'm not going to be able to hunt. I hope I don't draw a tag. Or, boy, I have a trip planned to the beach. I hope I don't draw a tag. Well, apply bonus point only. Don't be actively in those drawings. If you can look ahead enough and realize and know that you have date conflicts. So folks have been it seems like the last 3 or 4 years, that has been catching on. It used to be, it was almost comical. It was a joke inside, amongst a lot of us. It was like, well, if you want to draw a PA elk tag, plan a trip somewhere else at the exact same time. Because every year we have multiple folks that have conflicts. They have other hunts planned, they have vacations planned, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my Lord, what do I got? I got to make a tough decision here one way or the other. We've had some guys that can only hunt one day and they got to leave. We've had guys that can only hunt weekends, guys, that can hunt the end of the week and not the beginning of the week. just because of, previous commitments and stuff. So really, I can't stress enough for guys to take advantage of the bonus point only option. If you can look out far enough ahead and realize that you have a conflict with something else.
Yeah, I know. Like looking at the season dates here on my other screen, October 30th to November 4th is the rifle season, and those exact dates, I have a hunt planned where I'll be in Kodiak, Alaska, hunting sitka black-tailed deer. That I'm going to have to put bonus points down, even though that's where I have the most points for elk. In PA as most do because of the season, but it just wouldn't work out, and I would hate to be drawing that tag and not be able to do it.
Yes, for sure. Yep. We can't stress enough to folks to try to look ahead if they can. And try to make sure that there isn't calendar conflicts.
Yeah.
So that kind of rolls us like right into the actual application process itself. So that can get, depending on how familiar folks are with some of the Western application stuff, Pennsylvania system might seem pretty smooth to some folks in Pennsylvania that really don't get into the weeds with Western apps. Pennsylvania's system can seem a little overwhelming and a little clumsy, trying to navigate through. But the biggest thing to know is that you can apply for a PA elk tag without having to purchase a Pennsylvania hunting license. So that's a big draw for non-residents. So a non-resident can apply for a Pennsylvania elk tag any of the 3 seasons in any combination they want without purchasing a non-resident hunting license. Now, should they draw, then they have to purchase a non-resident elk tag and a non-resident hunting license, which I know pretty much every non-resident we've ever had were pleasantly surprised when they saw the low cost of Pennsylvania non-resident tags. So when you would go to apply, go ahead.
What is the cost of the non-resident tag?
So a non-resident elk tag is $250, bull or cow. $250 any sex. For a resident, it's $25. So if you would draw a Pennsylvania elk tag, you're paying $25.
Yeah.
If your buddy out west draws one, he's paying $250. And conversely, a non-resident general hunting license, which would be required, is $101, I think. So a non-resident can draw a Pennsylvania elk tag and be out of pocket. What I just say, $352 and change. Yeah. Yep. Crazy to think about. And if you got a bull tag in your pocket, you're legit talking about monster bulls, and 400 inches is definitely attainable, especially depending on the zone you would draw. So when a person decides that they want to apply for Pennsylvania elk, they can go, if they're in the state, you can go to any point of sale. So anywhere they sell hunting licenses, any Walmart, any Cabela's, Bass Pro, any mom and pop sporting goods store that sells hunting licenses, you can go and you can do your elk application in person. Anybody that wants to do it online, you can go to huntfish.pa.gov. That's also the same method where you report big game harvest. So a lot of PA folks are familiar with that because they use that for reporting buck and doe harvests and turkey harvests and stuff like that. So if you choose to go the online route, huntfish it's what I just said it. I just tongue twister myself now. It is huntfish.pa.gov. Once you go on there, if you're non-resident, you'll have to create an account. So you'll go in and enter all your information. You'll create an account and you'll be assigned a CID number. That's your Pennsylvania CID number for forever, for hunting and fishing purposes. So once you go and get your account set up, then you can go in and just have to follow along with all the prompts for purchasing licenses, then choose the elk section. And then it breaks it down further once you get in there. So you're going to apply for any of the elk seasons you would choose, archery, general or late, and you have to choose at least one zone, and you can choose up to 5. So at the time, this is where a lot of folks like kind of get squirrely. They're like, oh, zones, I don't even know. I don't even know what to do. So the way the system is set up, you have to choose at least one, and it gives you up to 5 choices of zones. And so how this goes, or the reasoning for that is when tags are awarded, they are awarded numerically in order. So if the first person that gets drawn has clicked fallback, which I'll touch on that here in a little bit, they're going to get a zone 2 bull tag, because zone 2 is the first numerical zone that has bull tags allocated. If the very first person that's drawn has picked zone 12 in their first choice, then they are going to get a zone 12 bull tag. So anywhere you fall in line there, if you have chosen fallback option, you're going to get any new, if your choices are already filled up, you're going to get the next numerically available tag. And they recently changed it. Used to be you would pick one zone. So I would apply for zone 12. Say I'm the very last person to get drawn for an elk tag, and zone 12 is already full. I would get whatever the very last tag available was. Now that we're up to, in the general season, we're up to 20. Fellas will have 20 bonus points plus this year's app going into the drawing for this year. So there's a lot of guys that are up there in application, or in bonus points. And there was also some feedback through that post-hunt survey that I had mentioned previously, that some folks that had drawn tags, yes, they were happy and ecstatic to draw a Pennsylvania elk tag, but they drew a tag for a zone they had no idea about where it was on the map. They had always dreamed of hunting elk zone wherever maybe they already have knowledge. They have a hunting camp, family member, a good friend, or whatever. So now we got guys that are burning. I mean, you think about some of the stuff out west, guys that have 20 points accumulated, they surely don't want to burn those 20 points on a tag for a zone or an area that they don't want to hunt. So the Game Commission recently, changed and adapted the application style and process to now allow guys to be more specific with their zone choices. And once you choose your 1 or 5th zone, you're going to get another pop-up, and that's going to be what's called fallback. I scratch my head when they chose that term, because fallback essentially means no preference when it comes to zone. So really, it should say no preference there, and it would probably, ease a lot of questions, answer a lot of questions for folks. So when you pick no fallback at the end of your 1 or 5th choice, you now essentially are saying, I have no preference for a zone. If all my choices are filled when I draw, I will still take the next available tag. If you do not click no preference, if you do not click fallback, and your zones are chosen when you would be pulled, you will not get a tag. Now, it's all done instantaneously. The computer sees all that stuff. You would never see, Bo Martonic would never come up on the screen and immediately go away because your zones would be filled. The computer internally digests and makes those adjustments and does all that. But what that's doing then is that is preventing the guys that want to hunt, or that's allowing, I should say, not preventing, it's allowing the guys who have 20 some, bonus points accumulated to be very specific about how they want to burn up and use those tags. They may be very comfortable never ever drawing a tag, but they surely, as long as it's would not be in a zone they don't want to. They want to apply those tags to very specific zones. For whatever reason, they have knowledge there. Like I said, hunting camp, some guys own property. So it's a very customizable way to apply. Now, again, you got to wade through the huntfish.pa.gov website for that, or you have to make sure your teller or whoever's at your point of sale, your mom and pop sporting goods, your Walmart, wherever you're at, is entering stuff the way you want to see it or the way you want it applied. We've had that happen before in the past. We've had guys come to us and say, I don't know how in the world I drew this cow tag because I always apply bull only. And I said, well, I bet you little Timmy at the Walmart sporting goods department put you in wrong,
Yeah.
So that leads us into another important thing then also with the huntfish.pa.gov and that website. You can actually go in there at any time and you can see your application history. So you can see what you've applied for. If you would go to Walmart in person and apply for your elk licenses, you can then come home, log on to huntfish.pa.gov. You can not only you can see your applications and how they were actually entered in the system, and very importantly, they are editable. So if you would see a mistake, you can go in and change the zones or change fallback or no fallback, whatever you would like. So that's another big thing aside from pushing the bonus point thing. Go in and check your application history and make sure that what you're seeing is what you actually want to apply for.
Yeah.
And you can also see your accumulated bonus points through that site. So if you're logged in there to your account, you should be able to see how many bonus points you're actually carrying in too. So that, and then you would repeat that same process for archery, general, and late season if you would want to do, any three of those. And all three or any combination, whatever would all. And I think it's like, my Lord, it's like $11.90. It's like less than $12 to apply for each season. So if you do all three seasons, I mean, you're into it for $36. It's just, It's crazy to think that that's all the application process or cost, here in Pennsylvania. It's it really is. It's got some value. I mean, it really does for what you potentially can, the potential outcome you can have if you would be lucky enough to draw.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm looking at my history here and looking through, and I have 11 points in the general, and then 4 for each the archery in the late season, as long as you've been able to. And you can go all the way back and see the exact dates you purchased the application, all the way back to. Looks like my dad must put me in at the very beginning for 2 years. Then he decided, you know what? No, we're not putting him in anymore.
You're on your own.
So then after high school, I put back in and started kind of rolling through it there, or after college actually. But it, you can see all of the details there. And that's really helpful to know that if someone made a mistake and there's still that time period before it's open, that you can go back and make a change.
Yep, it's my understanding you can edit your choices all the way up to that January 16 cutoff date online. If you would find that something would be wrong, you can log on, go into your account, like we said, and make any adjustments. But after January 16th, whatever's on that screen is what's locked in, and that's what you're in the lottery for. Do
you find, as far as with the zones, because I feel like that's the questions that I get the most, as far as the zones, like, I'm not going to ask you unless you feel like there's a good answer for it, but like, what zone do you pick? Like I don't feel like that's the best question, but more so is like, I know there's some, from being familiar with the area, that there's some zones that don't have as many elk as others. Some have some private land restrictions, stuff like that.
So really that's one of the most common questions, if not the most. Which zones do I pick? And it's, quite frankly, it's purely subjective. It's not so much like out west where there is a good zone as far as draw odds, or a good zone or better zone as far as population. Because there's elk, there's huntable elk in every one of the zones throughout all the elk range. There definitely are zones that have way more private property than others. There's one zone in particular, a pretty small geographic area. It's 80% private property. It's just the way that zone is. And I think if you would go back and look at the harvest history, oh my Lord, it's got to be over 90% of the elk harvested in that zone are on private property. Mm-hmm. So, and not that it's a bad thing. I mean, you can knock on doors and get permission. Outfitters have a lot of permissions, in those zones. We do as well. So, conversely, there's some of the zones that are 80% public ground, and the public ground elk hunting is head and heels over the private ground elk hunting in the zone. That's another big question too. A lot of folks, well, how much private ground do you have? How much private ground do you have? Well, that's hard to quantify because it exists in so many different zones. So why do I want to tell you how much private zone we have in zone 5 when you have a zone 12 tag? It's apples and oranges. And plus, I say in my next breath, I always followed up with, don't get hung up on the private ground access. I mean, yes, it is important in some of the zones, but there is very good elk hunting on much of the public ground, in all of the elk range. And it just, sometimes access isn't as good because, I mean, a lot of times private landowners, they let you have a little bit more carte blanche. You have easier access, 4-wheelers, trucks, whatever. But again, the private, how much private property do you have? How much private property do you have? Well, we can tell you whatever the zone is. We can get pretty close, but I'm going to tell you the next breath. Yeah, but we killed this giant 400-inch bull on public ground last year. or 2 years ago or whatever, and there's others out there like him. So, and some guys though, that's a selling point. It don't matter. They want to hear private property, and they think exclusivity is the end all be all, and it's gonna and you're very likely you're gonna get your elk, and I'm sure you're gonna have a great time, but you may have totally ignored something spectacular out on the public range somewhere. So it's as far as like I'll talk about it. I mean, it's a question we get asked, and I openly answer. So a lot of times most folks are talking about bulls, right? So where's my best chance of drawing a bull tag? Well, there isn't the only way you're going to have a better chance of drawing a bull tag would only apply to the amount of bull tags allocated for that zone. So some zones have 4 bull tags in archery season, some only have 1. Well, obviously you have a better chance of drawing 1 out of 4 than 1 out of 1. So that's really the only that, or if you want to increase your odds, apply either sex. Because if you apply bull only, you are only actively in that drawing for the allocation of those 65 bull tags over all 3 seasons. If you want your best chance of drawing a tag, apply either sex, and then you're in there for the cow allocation as well, the whole 144 this year. So the only way to increase your chance of drawing is to apply for all of the seasons and either sex. That's the only statistical way to do it. There isn't one zone that draws better than the other. So really, when we get asked all the time then about big bulls, so we say this all the time, and zones. I'll give you my personal opinion, I should say. I'm partial, and this is in no particular. I just put them in numerical order, just so that's how I always easily remember them. 4, zone 4, 10, 12, 13, and 14. So that's 5 zones. You can choose up to 5 zones at your time of application. Any elk tag in any of those zones, in any combination order, you can't go wrong with. And those 5 zones there historically give up the bigger bulls every year. Now don't get me wrong, a 4-inch bull can come from any zone, anywhere, anytime. Last year we killed a big 400-inch gross bull in November in zone 5. And the year before that, there was another real big one killed in zone 5. It was over a 400 gross bull. But historically, when we look back at our data and our anecdotal data, our actual paper data and game commission stuff, things that we know, those zones 4, 10, 12, 13, 14, those zones do it consistently. Like almost every year, you're going to look for a 400-inch plus bull multiples coming out of those zones. So that's always probably the number one question. What zone should I apply for? So really, that's it. So, and if you only want a tag in 4, 10, 12, 13, and 14, then do not click fallback at the time you apply. If you would like a tag in those zones, but really don't care, I'll take any tag, then make sure you click your fallback like we talked about, which essentially is no preference. And then at the time of your application, then when you click fallback and no preference, that's helping you to stay in the drawing. You're narrowed even less if you only are applying for your actual zone choices. So really, that's another thing too, is guys always ask, well, what's the odds of drawing? What's it? Well, it's actually incomprehensible now with as customizable as the application process is. Right now, there's actually no statistical way to figure odds at this point because of the fallback option, because of 1 zone choice, because of 5 zone choices. They're just it's not quantifiable. It can't be done.
It's different than when you're looking at say out west and you're applying for one specific unit. They know how many are going into that versus when you have these fallback options. Now it just throws it into a weird mix of like, I can't even wrap my brain about
nightmare.
that. Yeah, I can't even wrap my brain about
nightmare. Yep. So, but conversely, that you got to be in it to win it. People always say, "Oh, well, I've been applying for 10, 15, 20 years. I'm done. I'm not applying anymore." Well, you don't apply. Not applying is the only sure way to guarantee you'll never draw a tag, right? So we had and a prime example of luck of the draw is last year we had a young fella by the name of Chris Bowersox, a junior hunter, 12 years old, first time he ever applied, and he drew a bull tag for elk hunt zone 11 this year. And Mr. Bowersox came and hunted with us with Elk County Outfitters. I actually was with him personally on his trip, and the youth, man, hunting with the youth is just incredible. I mean, so he was 12 years old. He was a junior hunter, but his parents had him deeply involved in hunting for quite a while. He had taken advantage of the mentor season. He had taken some deer, bucks, and does with archery equipment, with rifle. So he might have been 12 years old and a first year junior hunter, but he had experience. And I shit you not when I tell you this, and I told him many times throughout the week, he was probably the safest person I've ever hunted with in the woods. I mean, just he was always very much aware of his weapon handling, his muzzle placement. I commended his dad many times in front of him and, back at the truck or whatever, like, man, Chris is doing good. I mean, he knows how to handle himself in the woods. He wasn't just walking along scuffing his feet either. I mean, he was always attentive. He was looking around. He was sneaking. He was smelling. He was looking. He just wasn't out for a walk because I got an elk tag. This kid was a hunter, and I think this elk hunt really solidified his hunting future even more.
Yeah,
I mean, because he was just so into it. And I don't know. I look back and I think about my kids growing up. Both my boys, took advantage of the youth seasons, and I see what they've developed into now when it comes to hunting. And it's just an amazing opportunity, to be able to get youth hunters out there. And I don't know, I almost get a little choked up over it, because when I came up through, we didn't hunt until we were 12.
Same here.
And I was fine. I mean, but boy, I'm 9, 10 years old. All I was jonesing to do was to be out with my dad. I couldn't hunt, but I would go out with him. And when the mentor program became involved, it was perfect timing with my kids coming up. They're now 19, almost 20, and 17, and they have had amazing hunting careers that I fully believe were just reinforced. I think they would have been hunters regardless. I mean, because they are affected by their surroundings and their family, and my whole family's big hunters, but getting them in them early years, I think, is a very formidable time to get the hooks into somebody, to really understand and appreciate and love the outdoors and want to continue the hunting tradition. And, hunting with Chris it was an amazing experience for me to be with such a youngster. And he did get a great bull on Friday. Right before the end of the season. We had a couple close calls otherwise on a couple really good big bulls. As it came down, we ended up filling his tag on Friday with a real nice 6x7, a great bull. It was just an overall great experience to have a junior hunter in camp and be able to be out in the woods and see, the future hunting generation coming up it's strong with this kid. And their whole family. And I commended his mom and dad. Again, it's not just him. I mean, it's his family and their whole group of friends also that hunt together and recreate together. It takes a village. That saying, it takes a village, is definitely true. And you really, as mentors and adult hunters, we always need to kind of be thinking about that and, be conscious of that. So yeah, it was great having this junior hunter, first time he ever applied, man. I mean, don't get down in the dumps because you've been applying for 20 years and haven't drawn. This kid did it on his first time, so you really, you got to be in it to win it. The only way you're never going to draw a PA elk tag is to not apply. That's essentially it in a nutshell.
Yeah. And too, I mean, they keep adding more tags, it seems like, every year. I mean, I had Jeremy Banfield on here probably 3 years ago now and talked about the history of it. So anyone listening wants to go back and understand the history of elk in PA, which is a really awesome story, I'd recommend going back and checking that out. But I know people personally similar to the story that you told there that drew on their first year applying. And it's just, I think that's what's cool about this system versus, like there's states like Colorado where I'm building points and I'm constantly chasing a unit that I'll probably never draw because it has point creep and it keeps getting worse and worse and worse. Where here
Yep.
you always have a chance. Now you never have a guarantee, but you always have a chance. And I think that's a
Correct.
cool way of doing it. And Pennsylvania offers like kind of what you alluded to there, but so many different opportunities depending on what you want. If you end up drawing a tag and it has, private and say you go with Elk County Outfitters and they have access to this private land and you want to hunt on a side by side and have a little bit of more of a plush hunt, you can do that. Or you can have more of a backcountry experience
Yep.
in some of
Yep.
these places. Cause I have a lot of experience in these areas
Oh, yeah.
and there's some big bulls that live far away from roads and you can have that Western experience in Pennsylvania.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I mean, there's, not without spot burning too much, but I mean, Quiana Wild area, it's a gigantic acreage. And I would never say that there's elk out there I've never seen people, but there's definitely elk out there that don't see many. And boy, they are on you right away. They smell you, see you, they don't like it, and they're getting out of Dodge. And another thing too, I guess just to reinforce with your listeners, some folks don't know this, even some PA residents I hear it from. There is no requirement to hire a guide or an outfitter in Pennsylvania should you draw. We hear that one a lot. Well, I don't want that tag because I don't want to be forced to go with an outfitter. Well, where did you hear that from? Well, my buddy so and so told me. That's wrong. That's just blatantly wrong. There's no requirement to hire an outfitter. Every year there's lots of guys that hunt DIY, and they're successful. Same with we hear a lot of, well, why do you have to bring them out whole? You see the elk come out whole all the time. Well, again, there is no Pennsylvania law on the books that requires an elk to come out of the woods whole. It is definitely something that is common and it's very unique to Pennsylvania. You don't see whole elk coming out of the mountains out west unless they're down on like some ranch land or something. But so there is no requirement to come out whole. You just need proof of sex when you bring your animal to the mandatory check station. So, but there's multiple ways to do it. I mean, why we do it? Sometimes it's just cool. I mean, if we have manpower, we can get them out. We have a couple of the guys have built some custom elk carts. You imagine like a deer cart, a two-wheeled deer buggy, a deer cart. We got a couple beefed up, oversized elk carts, and really, even with a really big bull, you get them in there and balanced just right. 4 or 5 guys can handle that on a logging road or an access road. You can play hell getting them out of wherever he is to some kind of access road, even if it's gated or whatever, but or a logging road. But once you get them figured out and balanced out, you'd be surprised. We actually can move them pretty good. And then sometimes we use there's a fella that drags them out with horses. We use him. He's a horse logger. And then we have cut elk up in the past in the wood. Not very often. I think actually even maybe only one elk over all the years. And it was in a real bad spot and it was really warm. And we were like, man, this is not going to end well. We need to get cutting. We can't deal with trying to, manhandle this thing out of there. So, again, there's no requirement to hire a guide and outfitter, and elk do not have to come out of the woods whole, here in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, no, that's those are really good points to be able to add on there. It's just like there's so much that you can have with your experience and what you're looking for in those types of hunts. Because I hear it all the time too, like, oh, the elk are tame in Pennsylvania, and I'll ask for your opinion here in a second. But from what I've seen is like, yeah, the ones that you see in town, like, yeah, those are going to be kind of tame. But you get some of these elk in some of these remote places, they act like elk. They're elk.
100%. And something else too, you go up to Benezet, up to the visitor center, up to the touristy kind of elk viewing areas. Those elk see hundreds and not thousands of people a day, and nobody's shooting at them. Nobody's giving them a hassle or a hard time. So they do become habituated. I don't know if I don't like to use the term tame, but
yeah,
habituated, but conversely, those elk do need managed and controlled also. So sometimes there are tags awarded in zones that aren't the most picturesque, when you envision what an elk hunt would be. But from a management standpoint, those elk still need to be managed. They still need to be harvested. And any sort of hunting pressure on those animals, whether it's realized instantly or not, does to a certain level put the fear of man into them a little bit. When Jeremy originally had instituted the archery in the late season, one of the side effects he was hoping, aside from providing more opportunity, he was hoping to create a little bit more of a human fear into some of these cases that we talked about by hunting pressure. These people now all of a sudden, well, these guys aren't shooting at us just for 1 week out of the year. Now they're here 3 different times out of the year, and maybe we should be a little bit more wary and a little bit more, cautious of where we're feeding and out in the open. And I don't know how you quantify that. I mean, I think you talk to some people, they say, hell no, that didn't do nothing. You talk to other people and they say, yeah, I think I've noticed a difference. I know, and just in the last 4 or 5 years alone, just from harvest success, I mean, there's some zones that used to be 100% success rate on cows. Now they struggle to get 40 and 50%. It's a combination of a few things, but I would like to think that multiple seasons of hunting pressure, plays a little bit of a role in that, and kind of, makes them a little more weary, puts the fear in them a little bit more, so elk act more like elk, and then when you're up there in Benezet in that visitor center area, especially during the rut, that's the peak time. Hundreds of thousands of folks come through there. It's during the rut. I mean, the bulls are crazy. They're quite frankly stupid at that time. I mean, they got one thing on their mind. They don't care about anything else. So sometimes that gives a false impression. And specifically, with bulls, I've seen this multiple times. I've seen bulls come out. I've seen them summer in some of those more remote areas where there's nobody around, and they drop off the top into the valleys around some of these other viewing areas and popular elk-looking areas. And when out in velvet, up where they were in the summertime, they catch wind of you, poof, they're gone. But now here they are in September, with drool hanging out of their mouth, and they're just staring right at a pickup truck because you're in the way of his cows on the other side of the road. He doesn't care. That's all he's thinking about. So, I've said this multiple times to a lot of folks, and I believe it holds true. Our elk especially, elk know where they should see people. When you're down in town and bulls are eating in a yard or in a farm field or something, and they're used to a line of vehicles out along the road stopped and looked at them and nothing ever happens, they know that. But you're out in Quiana somewhere and you come up out of a valley and up bump onto this oak bench and there's a herd of elk there. They know right away there ain't supposed to be people here, and they act totally different. I bet a paycheck on it. I know it because I've seen it, and it happens all the time.
Yeah.
They know where they're supposed to see people and where they're not supposed to. And when you're not supposed to be there, they're alert. They're on you. Something they don't like, they're gone, And that's where you can get into some really good hunting experiences, where you're hunting, where you're digging, and you gotta find them.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. And one story I want to hear about. So for anyone that's not familiar with elk in Pennsylvania, you mentioned a couple times 400-inch mark, which if any that is an absolute giant elk. I mean, that's some of the biggest elk in the country. But I remember getting a photo sent to me, I believe it was 2020. There was this big non-typical, I believe that you guys had guided, shot, it was 460 something. Is that correct?
Yep. So that bull is the current Pennsylvania state non-typical record. He was gross 467 and 7/8, I believe, and he nets 455 even. Just a monstrosity. It's actually it is the 4th largest hunter-killed elk in the world, and on the Boone and Crockett list, it falls in as number 6. So 6th largest. So the reason it is not number 4, even though it's the 4th largest hunter killed, it's not number 4 in the B&C list. There's 2 bulls bigger than him that were found as deadheads and picked up as deadheads. So Boone and Crockett still recognizes those 2 animals. So they score higher than him. Therefore, they hold a higher spot in the Boone and Crockett record book. But overall, he's the 4th largest hunter killed elk in the world. And just a monster. I mean, just unbelievable. I believe that bull had nearly 80 inches of non-typical antler, aside from his regular typical frame. Then conversely, last year, we killed a new state record typical. We actually killed a bull that's gross is 432 and change as a 6x6 typical, and nets 407. 407 and 2/8 as a 6x6. It is just that's a that's a unicorn anywhere. But for Pennsylvania, when our bulls, that bull, and I think that bull was 9 years old. Yeah, 9 years old. When our bulls, for whatever reason, our genetics, when our bulls get old into that mature window, that 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, even 12-year window, we get trashy, man. We get junky. We get splits off of splits. We get drop tines. We get webbing. For this bull to grow a big, huge 6-point frame is just incredible. He had 2 little kickers, one on the left side 4th and the left side 5th. And we actually, when you look at paperwork, it actually, it hurt. I think we lost about 7 inches. Because that's being a typical score, those are non-typical inches. They actually come off when we're figuring the net. So really, if he would have been totally slick and not had those 2 little kickers, we'd have been talking about a typical net 14s bull, It's just giant. As a 6x6 frame, our previous state record in Pennsylvania was another Elk County Outfitters client, and that was a 388 and 1/8 net bull, and that was a 7x7. 7 typical points. So this dude crushed the previous record, and he had less scoreable points. He was only had a 6x6 frame. So it really is just it's incredible. The bulls that are out there. Not to get too far back, but the elk hunt started in 2001. The modern day elk hunt in Pennsylvania, 2001. Prior to that, elk hadn't been hunted for 70 years. Elk were dying of old age. Any logical thinker would think, well, hell, that first year, 2001, every bull killed should have been 400 inches, right? They were all over the landscape out there. They weren't. They weren't taken. They weren't killed. And I think we can attribute that to a lot of different things, a lot of different social factors, and a lot of the way the guys hunt. But it took until 2004, I believe it was, for the first 400-inch gross bull to show up in the elk harvest. And now, ever since then, every year, it's progressed to where we're at now. And a lot of folks say, well, you're shooting all the big bulls, Well, yeah, we're shooting big bulls, but there's still a lot out there. There's still a lot of up-and-comers every year that are replacing them. Tag allocations have been fluctuating. Mentioned earlier about tags have been going up. This year, they actually cut them a little bit. Based on the aerial survey and based off of a calf mortality survey that recently finished up. So they actually lowered the cow allocation and bumped the bull allocation up. So overall, we have less tags, and that falls under the cow category. But they actually bumped up the bull tag allocation by 5, I believe 5 overall. So there's a lot of animals out there. They're constantly expanding too. There's elk as far north and east as Potter and the southern tip of western Tioga County. And they're down in Center County also. The Game Commission tries to use Route 80 as a physical barrier, but elk do routinely, every year cross Route 80, but that's not where they want them. And then you're getting into a lot more agriculture area. You deal with a lot more conflict and a lot more social acceptance issues down there, which, you could go down a whole big rabbit hole of what all that means, but I know we don't want to get that far in the weeds, but, elk they're still expanding. They're expanding their range. They're looking a lot more closely now at population dynamics, just like I said, with the lower numbers counted during the flyover this winter, and then the results of that calf mortality survey. But in general, the elk range is expanding, and that's the natural movement that the Game Commission is looking for, is that northeast. They want to get up into Potter County more and Tioga County more, where there's vast amounts of public ground and there's less chance of human conflict, and social unacceptance, which is the big thing. Farm agriculture. That's one of the biggest hits. There are some farms in the elk range, and quite frankly, the farmers do not tolerate elk. You even think a bear does damage in a cornfield. You should see what a herd of 20 elk does.
Yeah.
They'd just be totally wiped out. The farmers take huge financial losses, and they're within their legal right, to dispatch elk just the same as elk and deer, for crop damage. A couple farmers I know I talked to, they don't want to. They don't wake up every morning like, yeah, I can't go wait to shoot an elk on crop damage. They don't want to do it, but they just can't sustain the losses and the damage that comes from from the trouble that elk can cause when you're making your living, or a big portion of your living, off of your land. It's a tough scenario to be in, and that's why they want the elk to go north and east. They don't want them to go south anymore, or west even anymore, or straight east even more. They're looking for that northeast natural expansion through natural causes and habitat work. So
Yeah.
there's always something going on out there. Population dynamic wise, there's always something going on food and cover wise in the elk range. Trying to benefit the elk herd long term, and sportsmen and elk hunters.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's awesome, and I love seeing how the elk seasons have progressed, and getting, everyone knows, about the big elk in Pennsylvania, which is awesome, but just the idea that we have elk is so cool in Pennsylvania, and hunters play a huge role in the management aspect of that, and anybody knows, across the country how hunting helps management. It seems counterproductive when you think you're shooting an elk to help them, but at the same time you are, and you got to keep them under control. So I think that's awesome.
Yep, for sure. And I guess, again, not to go in, I think we're getting a little close here in our time, and not to go down a whole nother rabbit hole, but you just mentioned, you made a statement about how shooting one animal can benefit the herd long term. Pennsylvania has a conservation tag, or a governor's tag, many people call it, which is auctioned off to the highest bidder. So a lot of times whenever you hear governor tags, all people think about are some rich snobby hunters that fly in their airplane, shoot and fly out, and they're jerks and assholes and stuff. But truth be told, we at Elk County Outfitters have been very privileged for the last many years to have been involved with the hunts associated with the winners, with the high bids of those tags. And we have seen personally, I live in the elk range. I live up in Frenchville. So I live in the elk range. I see stuff every day. I have seen where the dollars go to the dirt that come from the proceeds, of those auction tags. And we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars here. I mean, these guys pay pretty significant funds, for a chance to come out and hunt Pennsylvania elk, and one animal. And those funds, I've seen those funds buy new equipment for food and cover crews. So I've seen new tractors purchased. I've seen new seeders. Why does the Game Commission need new equipment? Why do they need new trucks? Why do they need this and that? Well, you need new equipment to be more proficient, and to be more it's on the tip of my tongue now. I'm drawing a total blank. When you have new good equipment, you can make way better use of your time. So you're paying hourly rates to folks, to work. When they have good equipment, they're way more productive.
Yeah.
And so it helps in mowing food plots, planting food plots, maintaining roads. A lot of governor tag auction funds also go to the biologist, and he can replace aging GPS collars, for various studies. He's used monies to perform some other specific biological studies, where he would send samples away to a lab, and he would have to pay for them, pay for the review of those samples. So, and not only that, but now, habitat directly on the ground, aside from buying tractors and food plot seed and lime and everything. I have seen where governor's tag monies has directly created habitat. So aside from maintenance of existing food plots and openings, I've seen where hundreds of acres of new herbaceous openings have been created by the Game Commission, and in cooperation with the DCNR in a lot of cases. Brand new hundreds of acres of food plots that would not have been possible without funding, through auction tags. And these new food plots and openings, they don't benefit just elk and elk hunters. I mean, they benefit deer hunters, they benefit turkey hunters, they benefit small game and bear hunters. I mean, you're creating edge habitat and herbaceous openings. There's so many animals, game animals and non-game animals, songbirds and everything. They're just, anytime you can do anything to help the habitat and improve the habitat anywhere on the landscape is a positive thing. And these monies that are raised by these auctions, it's stark, it's glaringly obvious what's going on with this stuff. And to me, it's just a good thing. Initially, I remember even growing up and before I was involved with the elk hunt and all that stuff, I had heard of governor tags and Western stuff. And I always had that kind of that mentality, like, oh, those guys are a bunch of rich jerks, know-it-alls, but now that I've been actually involved and around, and I've hunted with some of these folks, and I've hunted with some of them multiple years, these are salt of the earth people. I mean, they're business folks that a lot of them have built their business up from the ground. I mean, they're hard workers. They just happen to be fortunate to have had success, and their success has led to a big bank account, and their big bank account has allowed them to travel and hunt. So it's one thing. If I ever have the opportunity, I always try to talk to folks and try to maybe dispel some of those stereotypes and preconceived notions about governor's tags and the monies and how those folks act. So far, I can't say. Since 2011, we've been fortunate enough to be involved with the auction tags, and I can't think of any of them that have been a jerk. I mean, I still stay in touch. I mean, I text regularly with them. I talk with a bunch of them. They're friends. A couple of them actually came up to Jack's funeral. I mean, you just become friends with folks, and you got to put those preconceived notions and stereotypes out of your mind, because 99.9% of the time they're not accurate.
Yeah.
So I'll get off my soapbox there. I've any opportunity I have, I always like to try to talk to folks, like explain. This is why it's good, not only for elk hunters, but it's good for you as a sportsman that would happen to enjoy, any of the elk range and the habitat that's there, that's gone onto the ground, the monies that's gone onto the ground there in that region. It's just, it's a great setup. I truly believe and back and support it.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I just talked about that on a recent podcast, not specifically about these auction tags, but some of these people that have access or pay, for these hunts that are a lot more than most of us can afford. I feel like, even growing up, I felt that way, where I was like, oh, those type of people. And then I've got to meet a bunch of them and realize, like you said, yeah, there's some that were somehow, just given money and became, whatever, and who cares? But most of them have worked their asses off to get there and to get to that point and be able to spend their money how they want. I'd do it if I could. I'd be buying that governor's tag. And what it does is it just supports the elk conservation in a level that most of us can't do financially. And to be able to have that in the area that you live in, like, that's a prime example of some amazing habitat work, where they've done, for the elk, for the deer, for the turkeys, for all the different animals. So I'm also a big fan of that. So I'm glad that you did bring that up. So we had a little bit of a technical difficulty there. And so Brian's, I guess his microphone has been muted, but as we're about ready to close out this podcast, I just urge everyone to go over and check out Elk County Outfitters, Instagram, Facebook, their website. Go check it out. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out and ask questions about that. Also, I'm going to have an updated article on my website about the elk draw, the stuff we talked about, links to this podcast, everything there, so that if you're looking to apply and help elk conservation, you can do that.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of East Meets West Hunt with your host, Bo Martonic. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit eastmeetswesthunt.com, Facebook at East Meets West Outdoors, and Instagram at East Meets West Hunt. If you enjoyed today's episode, please review and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.